Hi, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Today, I want to talk about how to learn how to turn things that are meant to destroy you or intended to be negative, turn it into a positive thing. And I want to talk first about when I went to Idaho last year. And when I was there, I went to the Craters of the Moon National Monument, and that's in Cary, Idaho. And what it is it's a place where there was great volcanic activity centuries ago, thousands of years ago, and there were cinder cones there, and the cinder cones are raised bits of earth, and they're anywhere between 20 and 1,000 feet, and that's where it's like a vent for the earth. So that's where the lava and the ash and rocks will come out of. And so there are many cinder cones. It's hundreds of acres. And it's just black basalt rock. There's nothing growing on it. There's barely anything there. It's just rock, and it's black. You feel like you're in a different world, sort of. And it was the home of the Shoshone and Bannock tribes of our indigenous persons. And those tribes, the people of those tribes, loved the earth and respected the earth. And one thing one of their practices was to look at things that were bad in the environment or that were negative in the environment and learn how to work with them. So they didn't leave the area where this destruction happened. Most people would be like, oh, well, I have to move from here. I have to go somewhere where life is flourishing, where things are replenishing and those kind of things. But these tribes decided that they were going to continue to live there and work with all of the rocks and what the earth had produced. And it's fascinating because, the volcanic ash and the volcanic rock, once the rock turns into ash, it nourishes the ground, right? And so then the earth can replenish itself. Now, at this point, it's still not done that yet, but it will eventually. And the Shoshone and Bannock tribes, they learned how to work with the earth that they had. And it's just a beautiful story of what can be done if you really put your mind to it and think about and learn and respect things. So I want to talk about that in this episode of Revive and Rise. When things are meant to destroy you, to cause pain, to be negative, how to turn that into a positive. And I'll give you one example. This has happened many times along the journey of my life. But I'll give you one example, and that would be, my physical situation. As many of you know, or um, there was a time when I was unable to walk and speak clearly. I had a brain injury, and I think about that time, and being in that situation when I was in physical therapy, when I was in speech and occupational therapy, I saw a lot of people that were going through very similar things, right? And it doesn't even take that. You can see these things when people are experiencing physical challenges or mental challenges or various things like that. And sometimes people just get tired. Sometimes people just give in or are unable to overcome those kinds of things. And a lot of times people in society will call those people lazy, or will say they're giving up, or will say, that they just can't do it, and they'll call them different names, or they'll say other negative things, and that's just not true. Those are very, very difficult situations to be in, and sometimes you just don't have the strength at that time. Sometimes, we're all in different places in life, and we all have different situations. No two things are the same, right? So to be so judgmental and call those individuals names, or just say negative things about them, it's really, you just can't do that. And it's really not, it's not fair to that person, for lack of a better word. But a lot of times it does happen, and I just want to remind everybody that we just need to stop and think. That's the first thing that we need to do. And going back to my situation, it became more of a mind over matter thing at certain points, but it's still very difficult. And I think about all of the things that I went through, all of the emotions, all of everything that it took, all of the hard work. And if I wasn't in the right place at each of those times, things wouldn't have turned out the way they did for me. And I've been in other situations that in different times since then and before then, and I wasn't able to overcome those situations. And some situations I'm still trying to overcome now. And sometimes it just takes time. And sometimes it just takes time for us to get to that space that we need to be mentally to continue. Sometimes it just takes time for us to understand what we're going through, or what may have happened. I think one thing that's important is for us to stop and try to understand, because you can't do anything if you don't understand first. If you don't understand what's wrong, then you can't help yourself, and because you don't know what to do. If you don't understand the problem, you can't fix it, right? So I feel like that's one thing that we need to do. And in my situation, luckily I had therapists to help me to understand what I needed to do and the things that were going on. I had people around, healthcare workers that were able to support me and able to help me understand. And that was really important, because that I think made a difference. And that's something that all healthcare workers need to know, what a difference they make in their patients' lives and in the outcomes of their patients, is that, we all need support. And when you're a patient of some sort, or someone that is dealing with, some sort of physical or mental challenge or emotional challenges, it's important, so important to feel supported. If you feel all alone, unheard, or unseen, then that's going to leave you feeling defeated, among other things. And there were times, I'm not going to lie, there were times when I did feel very alone. There were times when I did feel defeated and worthless and those kinds of things. And you could tell if you were able to follow me in my progression in my journey. You can definitely tell when I felt supported and when I don't. And even now, along my healing journey, it's amazing. I do have the opportunity to reflect a lot. I'm fortunate to be able to do that. And when I look back to where my healing journey began and to where I am now, to me, it's just fascinating to see all the different things that have taken place and all the different support I've received and the different growth that has occurred each time, each moment. And I realize how long it's taken, and I'm not where I want to be at all, but it's a journey, right? So, and I feel like we have to give ourselves grace. We have to give ourselves grace then and understand that it's not about how fast you get there, and it's not about how long it takes, but it is about the journey and the growth, and step by step you'll get there, because you don't want to move too fast and then everything fall apart. And that's really important. As long as you're open to learning, open to being open to new changes, and open to suggestions, you'll have growth. And that's so important, I feel like. And another thing that I know I've struggled with, there have been various people in my life that this has occurred. There can be different things that are done that are intended to be negative Some are not even intended to be negative, they just are. So it all depends, and it depends on how you perceive it, right? But it can be anything from physical, mental, emotional things. It can be heartbreak over something. It can be grief. It can be, someone's words, them saying things. It can be so many different things, but it's up to us to turn those things around. And, there was a long time that I was so angry. And when people said those kind of things, oh, well, you've got to turn something bad into something good. And, up until a few years ago, I've always been a positive person. But a few years ago, I became a person that I didn't like, and a person that was not positive at all, but was always negative. And I didn't see, if we want to use the metaphor, the light at the end of the tunnel, I didn't see that light anywhere. And sometimes we're in those spaces, right, where we just feel helpless, we feel hopeless, and we can't understand. And that's okay. And if you are at that space at this moment, then just listen and try not to get angry. If you do, it's certainly understandable. I've been there. I get it. It is so hard at the time when you're in that space to even think about even one thing about the situation you're in being good, or how can this turn around to be something positive? But it can. It can. And I think also about my situation, I'm able to turn those the physical struggles now that I'm able to talk about it openly. I'm able to share that with people and share my experiences, so that maybe someone who is going through those kinds of challenges, they can say, oh, well, maybe I can do that, or maybe that can happen to me, or there's somebody else that went through this. Because even though, we logically know that these things happen to other people, it's so different to hear somebody's story and realize, oh, that does happen. And I feel that way too. I felt that way too when that happened. So maybe I didn't overreact. Maybe it's okay that I felt that way. There's somebody out there that understands. So it's really interesting how that happens. And now that I open up and have shared that, I do get feedback that it does help people, or it does make people feel not so alone, and that's very important, and that means a lot. So, but our first step is to realize and to understand what has happened, or where we're at. Understand the problem clearly. And sometimes, it's very apparent. Sometimes it's not. And going back to the second example, that I was going to share. There have been people in my life that I felt were very important for whatever reason. I felt they were very, very important. And I discovered that they've said such negative things about me or portrayed me in such negative ways to others. And I took that upon myself, and I started to believe it too, because these were pretty important people. So if they were going to say that about me, it must be true, right? At least that was the way I was thinking. And so those stories that I learned were being told, I started to believe them. And I started to believe those lies. And I started to hold on to it. And sometimes my logical mind would question, but then my heart and my body would hold on to it. And I couldn't get them to agree, and I couldn't understand. First, I didn't understand why people that I thought so highly of would say such things. But then I didn't understand fully how that could not be true. And so it developed a belief system in my mind, and a belief system that I carried with me for a long time. And I want to talk about that part because it's easy for us to point out or determine, understand something that's apparent, a problem that's apparent, something that we can visually see. That is one thing I have experienced. If you have something physically wrong with you, like maybe a broken arm or a broken leg or an amputation, something that you can visually see, then people understand more. People can see it. And so you can understand those difficulties. But with your mind and with other things that you're not able to see visually, it's really hard to understand or comprehend what's going on, especially if you yourself cannot express what's going on. So when you see those things, when you think of those things, and sometimes you don't even know you're thinking about it. If you have a belief system, that belief system came from somewhere a long time ago. That belief system was created somehow in your mind by conscious thinking or subconscious thinking. Maybe you were getting some type of clues or subconscious messages that you didn't even realize. Both of those happened to me. I heard words, but I also observed actions. And so both of those things created a story that I began to tell myself, and I began to believe. In that story that I believed, in that belief system, and those things that I thought about myself determined and shaped a lot of my ideas and my thoughts and my actions that have occurred throughout my life. And so when we identify those stories, those lies, those things that may not be true, those things that have either been said or that we have observed or that we have taken in somehow and absorbed into our hearts, into our minds, we need to stop and think logically. What is that story that we're hearing, we're seeing? What is that story that we're starting to believe? Once we name that story, then we need to name the storyteller. Where is that coming from? Where are those words coming from? Where are those actions coming from? Where are those beliefs coming from? We need to analyze all of this. And then we need to think about the person that is doing the telling or that is doing the showing, the person that is somehow making up this belief system, making up this story. Who's telling the story? And if it happens to be you telling the story, then where did that come from? Where did that belief system come from? And it could be family members, it could be friends, it could be strangers. But who is it? And then once we decide that, discover that, like, where does the trust come from? Why are we trusting these people? Why are we believing what they say? Why are we believing what they do? What makes us believe this? What makes us value this person or these people? Because it can be a group of people. It can be a church. It can be a group of some kind, a social group. It can be any people. And so we need to think about what has made us put our trust into these people. And then we need to stop and we need to think of an alternative. Okay, but so if this is the story, this is the person that's saying this is where I got this belief system, is because I trusted this person that told me this or that showed me this. But what is it about that person that I trust? Well, maybe I shouldn't trust that person. Maybe there's a reason that I shouldn't put my faith in that person. Maybe there's a reason that this person is wrong. Maybe they got some inaccurate information, or maybe there's an alternative reason that they're doing that, or that they're saying that, or that they're showing you that, or maybe they don't realize that they are showing you these things. All of these questions in our mind that we need to answer, and then we need to have an alternative story. For example, okay, say that your family member like one family member tells another family member negative things about you. Simply negative things. Oh, this person yelled at me, or this person disrespected me somehow. This person never helps me. This person is such such a bad person because of this or because of that. And you hear that and you see how other family members maybe change the way they feel about you, or other family members change the way they think about you. And then it starts this big cascade, and you're there, and it's like, oh, I see this, I hear this, so therefore I'm going to believe these negative things about me. And that can be family members, friends, or strangers that do that. And that's kind of how, it starts. And once we look at these people, we need to have an alternative way of thinking and tell the story in an alternative way. And it can be either, well, that's just an outright falsehood, and I don't know why they're saying that. Or, well, that person perceived this to happen, but this is what really happened. And so, therefore, I'm not going to believe those things about myself because they're not true. We can either take that approach, or we can look at the person and we can say, well, I'm trusting this person, but really at that time that they said that or did that or whatever the negative thing was, at that time, they didn't have enough information to say that or to do that. Or maybe something happened to them that they're doing that out of anger, out of frustration, or maybe they're not qualified to make those accusations or make those statements or make those ideas. They're not qualified to do that. And when we start to think about that and start to learn those things and feel like, well, I'm looking at this person, or I'm looking at this situation. This person can't make these decisions, these determinations that they did because this happened to them or that happened to them, or they didn't have the right information. And so I've believed this, but now I'm going to stop believing it. And when we try and stop believing something that we've believed our entire lives, it is extremely hard. And I will tell you that I'm still trying to overcome that hurdle. And it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. I've been working on it for 5 years, and still that belief system is there. From the time that I discovered that belief system. So it may not be something quick that you can fix. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, oh, okay, that was said, that was done. I started to believe it, and this is why it can't be done. It can't be true, and I'm done. That belief system is gone because I've just disproved it. But sometimes it's not that simple. You have to dig, and you have to continue to dig, and you have to, it's a lot of work. But I know you can do it. I know we all can do it. We just have to keep trying and not getting discouraged. And so that's what I want all of us to do. It's it's a good practice to have as well, is just to sit with yourself in the quiet and just try and think about something that may be a little negative, or a big negative thing, something that you've always thought about yourself or always wondered why. Maybe you always wondered, or you always felt neglected or unloved or abused, or in some form or fashion, right? Because there's so many different forms of things. Maybe you felt worthless, or maybe you felt unworthy. Maybe you felt like you didn't deserve certain things. And then just ask yourself, why? Do you really know where that comes from? Do you really understand why you feel that way? If you do, great, you can move forward. If you don't, try and explore that. Try to understand why you would think that, or why you would feel that, or where that belief comes from. And that, I'll be talking about this in future episodes, but that is a very solid way to practice self-love, is to take time with yourself. Like that's, we're all so busy. We're so busy doing this. We're so busy doing that. We've got this deadline, that deadline. This has to be done today so that I can do that tomorrow. We're so busy, constantly running. But we have to take a moment to think about ourselves and to check in with ourselves, to reflect on things. We have to take a moment so that we can grow, and so that we can break circles, so that we can break circles of oppression, so that we can break circles of negativity that have been constant in our families, so that we can break out of circles of bad habits, of manipulation, circles of guilt, circles of shame. So that we can break those circles, we're going to have a pause. And we're going to have to be able to reflect. And I think that's something that is so under-practiced. People just don't do that, and they don't take care of themselves in that way. It's apparent now. You can see so many things and so many people that are walking around with all these beliefs about themselves, all these negative beliefs of themselves, shame, neglect, and all kinds of negativity, negative thinking about themselves. They've been told their entire life that they're wrong, that they're bad, that they can't do things, that they shouldn't do things. That terrible, ugly word, should. There's so many people that have these belief systems that are wrong, that are so negative, and they're taking up all the space in their life, all the space in their heart. But if we just pause for a minute and just reflect and dig deep and think of where that is coming from. And if you find that root belief and that root beginning, then you have the power to change that. Because if you find that root beginning, you can dig it up, you can dig it out, and you can start over and form a new beginning and form a new belief system that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm doing on my journey. It's difficult, but I'm trying. Sometimes I take a step forward and sometimes I take 10 back. But at least I'm always trying to move. And I'd like to invite you to as well. I'd like to invite you to try this practice and see what happens. Just try. Just try and see what happens. It may be difficult at first, but then when you start to get into the habit and you start to get into the practice, it becomes easier. And it won't happen necessarily the first time. A lot of times you have to explore. And once you explore one thing, it leads to another, and it leads to another, and it leads to another. And before long, you have so many things. And, but you need to take care of them one step at a time, because that's the only way that we move forward. You don't walk 10 miles at once. You don't run 10 miles at once, but you run or walk one step at a time. You can't climb the 10-foot ladder all at once, but you go one rung at a time. And so that's what we need to remember. That's what I want us to remember and think about today. So I invite you to go to my Substack, read what I write, go listen to other episodes of Revive and Rise. It's at Melody Parrish. And drop me a note. Let's start a conversation. Let's talk about it. Thank you for listening today. And remember, you do not have to suffer alone.